kind of a challenge I would have to anybody who watches the Is Genesis History movie. When one side presents their argument, it sounds compelling until somebody comes and cross-examines them.
Look at this canyon. It looks like the Grand Canyon with that stream in the bottom of the canyon and all. How long do you think it took to make this canyon? Would you believe that all this is actually younger than I am? The eruption of Mount Saint Helens laid down all these layers rapidly. A couple of years later, more volcanic activity caused a mud flow that cut out this canyon, all in a couple of days.
Dell is babbling about Mount Saint Helens, which brings in the interbedded volcanic ash issue he and other YECers normally steer clear of. RJ, any views on this?
The sediments on Mount Saint Helens were unconsolidated volcanic ash, which is easily eroded. The Grand Canyon was carved into harder materials, including well-consolidated sandstone and limestone, hard metamorphosed sediments, plus a touch of relatively recent basalt.
So you're saying that the two canyons are cut into different materials, so it's not really fair to compare the two. Is that what you're saying?
Well, yes, but that's not the only reason. The walls of the Mount St. Helens Canyon slope 45 degrees, whereas the walls of the Grand Canyon are vertical in places. The streams flowing down Mount St. Helens flow at a steeper grade than the Colorado River does, allowing for greater erosion. Additionally, the Grand Canyon is more than 100,000 times larger than the canyon on Mount St. Helens. For these reasons alone, the two are not at all comparable.
Did God make the world in a few days?
Nope.
Or did the earth form over millions of years? Is man descended from apes, or...
Just stop it. No or. Humans are apes, jackass.
Was there a global flood?
No, that's just a story. And it's a stolen story.
Is Genesis history?
You're seriously asking us that?
For evidence that a global flood happened, I heard of a scientist named Steve Austin.
That would be Stephen Austin, Ph.D., geologist. His claimed area of expertise is sedimentary geology. He's going to tell us about the layers of sediment laid down by the alleged global flood. Let's see what he's got to say, shall we?
We have somewhat of a layer cake here. These layers, or strata, are in Colorado, in Illinois, Pennsylvania. Sediment flowed in and accumulated in layers, one on top of another, and naturally converted to rock.
Naturally they convert to rock, Stevie Boy casually says, avoiding that annoying little issue of how long that takes and whether any flood event could change or speed that up.
So this rock used to be liquid.
What do you think, RJ? Liquid rock?
Liquid? Something like a thin milkshake? The particles come from a landscape, brought by water, and are deposited, dropped, precipitated out. It varies, and can be observed in current geology and experiments. So already terminology is being used to prepare the viewer to accept the sloshy land of flood. And let's not forget some of the world's geology deposits are aeolian, wind-blown, not waterborne. Experiments also show why those forms look different in the sediments, as distinctive as the weave of a cloth. And what's with the traipsing off to far-flung poster spots like the Grand Canyon instead of trying to explain the geology under their feet at home? After all, if the flood were global, they could see it wherever they lived. No vacation required.
4,000 feet of flat-lying strata are flat. Looking in between the strata layers, we don't see the passage of time. When we see the strata themselves, they provide evidence of very rapid sedimentation, just minutes or hours to form.
Preserved in the Cambrian Tapeats, Bright Angel, and Muab formations are bands of marine fossils. These are not only chronicled a very gradual rise in sea level, they remained in parallel when the rocks were subsequently tilted. Geologist Arthur Stroller considered this configuration the coup de grace for the deluge theory of the Grand Canyon, for to bring this set about meant having the floodwaters lay down a repeated sequence of parallel chevrons. It would be the equivalent of having a mudslide sweep through a tea shop and knocking over all the furniture, but ending up with every cup still in its saucer fixed in place on the tip tablecloths. It would have been genuinely fascinating to read a flood geology explanation for so unusual an arrangement, but this was one aspect of Grand Canyon stratigraphy that did not come up in Austin's book.
My understanding is that ocean floor upheaval occurred.
Well, his understanding is wrong then, as nothing oceanic about the deposits is noted, but instead gentle seacoasts. A giant surge of water would wash those details away, not make them.
That's why we get these marine fossils in layers.
RJ, I know you have something to say about that.
Marine fossils in layers? Oh, Stevie boy, then why not advanced fish, or plesiosaurs, or orcas, and advanced foraminifera, which we get in droves in later deposits? Everything in the fossil record had to be contemporary, and no YECer, least of all Smiley Face Austin, has got within 900 miles of explaining the selectivity and specificity of the fauna in the Grand Canyon, or anywhere else for that matter. That's called biogeography and taphonomy, if you'd like to know the scientific subdisciplines that delve into those things and which anti-EVOs generally, and YECers specifically, operate very far away from. Foraminifera silicate casings are nearly indestructible, which is why the record of them is so nice and evolutionary.
6 months, water prevailed. Another 7 months to subside.
6 months water prevailed, 7 months to subside, huh? Nice.
And how exactly did that cause the loose sediment to turn into rock almost instantly? Any science experiments to back that up, Steve? Or is that yet another baseless assertion? Alas, been wading through decades of creationist apologetics for that little detail to be divulged.
Representing the later stages of the flood, the surface was beveled by the retreating floodwaters. As it retreated, the continents probably uplifted.
The continents probably uplifted? Because of retreating water. Got any demonstrable mechanism for that? Anyone? Anyone? Bueller? Bueller?
And of course, the Ark landed in the high country.
The Ark landed in the high country? So how come they got dry rock to land on? How come that spot of unreal estate managed not to be a glop of congealing, maybe not yet rock, like what must have been occurring in the Grand Canyon? The need to have the strata and the canyon formed in the flood puts you in a weird bind, Stevie boy. Now, flood apologists invoke a lake flooding upstream after the main waters subsided to do the canyon carving, but that still crimps their timings, as they must have the rocks harden in uber-quick mode in order to allow the after-flood to cut a canyon in it. Oops!
And mountains have risen since then.
Stevie boy, put this on your to-do list. Figure out in detail how the hell all the known big bumpy mountain ranges poked up, again in super fast fashion, post-2500 BCE, before they had a chance to be noticed by the natives who didn't see any excessive bumpiness happening on their watch. Never mind that we can measure mountain uplift and plate movements these days with millimeter accuracy. And by the way, if flood geology with its crashing funhouse continents is so correct, how come not a single oil company on Earth uses flood geology to find oil? Nope, they rely on the standard geological system and literally get returns on their investment in science. Don't plan on getting rich anytime soon with the Answers in Genesis oil drilling startup.
Most geologists have jettisoned the idea that the Grand Canyon was cut out slowly by the Colorado River.
Most geologists have jettisoned the river formation of Grand Canyon? Oh, really? Care to name a few of those most geologists, Steve? I don't know of any, let alone most. Gonna have to call bullshit here.
You can't imagine a canyon enduring tens of millions of years like this. Eventually, the sides would have collapsed.
What the hell? The nested V-shaped canyons are exactly what slowly forming canyons do when the height differential between headwaters and end outflow is increasing faster than the erosion.
It can be due to a rise in the landmass at the upper end, as in the case of the Grand Canyon, or because the outflow body lowered. This happened some millions of years ago when the Mediterranean dried up, causing the Nile to carve an incised canyon, which had since filled in from sediment after the Gibraltar plug broke and the Mediterranean rose again. This canyon was discovered by soundings conducted to build the foundations for the Aswan High Dam.
I think this all came to be by catastrophic drainage of lakes.
As expected, Austin mentions his favorite, the catastrophic draining of hypothetical post-flood lakes.
Austin likes to use the Spokane flood as a model for rapid erosion, but he omits such details as the waters racing along at up to 75 feet per second, noted in John Allen's classic 1986 book. Austin had set a ceiling rate of 5 feet per second on the high-velocity flow he proposed for the Coconino sandstone dunes. Austin also relied on Leonard Brand, a creationist biologist at Loma Linda University, for the claim that tracks of a Permian proto-mammal preserved there were made underwater. The criticism of Brand by fossil track expert Martin Lockley characterized the flood theory of the Coconino dunes as geologically naive and disingenuous.
For those of you that are interested, I've included a link in the description that explains this in much greater detail than we have time for now. It's titled Letters to Creationists, and I hope you enjoy it.
Time is not a magic wand. The eroding of the Grand Canyon occurred over weeks, not millions of years.
Austin claims weeks, not millions of years, could have formed the Grand Canyon. Time is not a magic wand, he says, but neither is a flood event that could not have produced what we see. To carry off that much sediment would have involved water flow as grand as Missoula flooding, but they carved steep-walled canyons, not V-shaped nested ones. Links to details of this kind of flooding are also included in the description, listed as Ice Age floods.
And Austin is still begging the question, how did the prior flood slurry turn into rock fast enough not to be washed away, as thoroughly as a garden hose cleans your driveway of a layer of undifferentiated muck?
The boundary between the granite rock below and the sandstone above is the surface we call the Great Unconformity. It shows the magnitude of flood flow. The Great Unconformity is continent-wide, in fact, global.
Austin insists he finds the Great Unconformity to be continent-wide, indeed global. Perhaps along with finding Waldo and Sasquatch, Austin has spared readers details on these deposits, or how he ascertained they represented the same moment in time that he thinks occurred only 4,500 years ago.
Somehow those pyramid-building Egyptians managed not to notice the Middle Eastern or African flood, as their recorded history straddles that zone in the pyramid-building phase.
The power of moving water was beveling and pulverizing rock, depositing great thicknesses of layers.
This is more of Austin's wishful thinking. The flood was depositing great thicknesses of rock. But particle settling does depend on the speed and density of the water and the sediment, and just invoking large amounts of water is far more of a magic wand than anything uniformitarian geology ever relies on.
Yeah, make the waters too big and fast, and they don't deposit anything. They erode. Slow it down enough to actually deposit stuff, and you can't get the thickness he wants, and turn it all into rock without the application of time. It's the same reason that jacking up the temperature of your oven to 4,500 degrees won't cut the time of baking your cake by 90%. It will just produce a charred cinder.
The conventional story says that there is a lot of time between these layers.
That's right. You can't make rock from sediment in a week, or a month, or... screw it. I've had enough of this babble. You all get the idea. Subscribe to both SciStrike and Paulogia channels, or follow the linked playlist to proceed to the next chapter of Is Genesis History Science? See you there!